What do we say, fam? Welcome to Simplexity, a little podcast where we take seemingly complex matters and attempt to make them plain and simple. My name is Sammy Foster, joined with, is it joined with or joined? It would be joined with.
Yes, it would.
The one and only co-host worth having, Boots, and a very, very special guest here today, the one and only Evan Connelly. You know what? You know what I could do? I could spend, truly, every time I mention your name, I could spend our entire episode giving your backstory, testimony,
Hey, go ahead.
our connection. We don't have time. Maybe that's another episode.
Yeah, that's the bonus material.
Yes, that's behind the scenes. But Evan Connelly is our Chief Operating Officer, lame, of
Update my email
our
signature real
online, update your job description, of your I call you our campus pastor. Although you haven't been set in yet. I can do what I want.
Does this count right now? Is this the moment?
This is the set in.
It's on film. Yeah.
I said our online our online campus pastor here at Lighthouse Church. You have worn many a hats, but today the hat that you wear, be that you're involved in our IT, you've overseen all of our sort of online presence, production, a myriad of other things, but today we're going to ask you some questions to sort of drill down. Be that you are a self-proclaimed nerd.
Absolutely.
We want to get into AI.
So you guys looked around the office. You said, "Who's the biggest nerd around here?" And my name came up first. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that about
There
right?
wasn't even a hesitation,
Yeah.
little partner.
You were the best choice.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to argue with that.
It's great to have you.
Hey, it's good to be here. I've been a long-time listener. You know, all 4 seasons now.
Okay.
Yeah.
My man. Amen. Not many people say that. Most of our guests that come on, they haven't listened to anything.
No. That's
I
the
didn't
only
say I've
episode
listened to
they'll
a
listen
lot. I
to.
said I've been a long-time listener.
There you
I
go.
listened to one episode at the beginning, so
Yeah. One and done.
You know what, Ev?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Cut.
Yeah.
All right.
You're starting to sound like DT over here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sarcasm and dry humor.
He wasn't really into it.
No, but he really enjoyed it after the fact because a lot of people told him that they liked his episode.
Yeah, so then he started listening.
Yeah, he's like, maybe there is value to
Yeah,
this.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
DT is a very vain man. He's only consumed with self. Anyway, let's move right along.
Now, I'm starting to question if I want to be on here.
Yeah, really.
It is a
too
hot
late?
seat.
Is it too late to walk off?
It is. It is. You're stuck. And I would just have everybody know, although you can't see, we have our team member back in action. Mike is in the house this morning.
Yep.
Woo woo. Mike has been down and out, man. Back issues, a myriad of other, but buddy, we're glad to have you behind the camera. Love you. All right, Boots. Let's get
Okay.
into it.
Okay.
This one's going to be fun.
I'm a little bit hurt you didn't mention the shirt that I'm wearing that you got me.
Oh, I am sorry.
But here we are.
You do rock that well.
I figured I'd wear it in honor of getting back from a little beach vacay.
There you go. Got
Yeah.
a good little sun-kissed tan going on. Not too much.
No, not too much.
All right,
No.
we'll
It's
leave
like
it there
a backhanded compliment.
You're about to say some mean things. I can sense it. So we're just going to move right along. So
All right,
the
keep it
topic
moving.
for today is AI, artificial intelligence. We picked Evan for a reason. Evan, if you could please unpack what we mean by that.
Yeah, honestly,
Just to kinda set the stage.
That's probably a good place to start. You guys know, I mean, AI is such a broad term. I don't know that there's really even one universally agreed upon definition, but really, I mean, like, so many different things you could probably call AI. Like, really, so I think one way you could look at it is, like, is it something that traditionally we'd only think a human brain could do this? So whether it's understanding something, interpreting something, creating something, that normally, you know, you'd think only a human could do this, but that then we could design a system that could kind of almost, you know, in that regard, act like a human brain. And so, I mean, there's like all kinds of small, like narrow aspects of that.
Okay.
Honestly, things we use every day, like, you know, voice to text on your phone. Like, I remember even as a kid, there was this toy I had that could understand like 3 words. And I was like, my mind was blown that it could understand like 3 different words.
What were the words?
I don't even remember. It was that good. But, you know, now it's like
That mind.
I bet you AI remembers.
it sure does. But, you know, it's crazy to think that you just talk to your Alexa or Google or whatever, and at least half the time it'll understand what you're saying, and
Yeah.
and so just to be able to understand language like that, or translations, all that kind of stuff. But I think really what we probably want to talk about is more recent ChatGPT.
Right.
So what is ChatGPT? What does that look like? And that's a whole nother area of AI. Honestly, pushing us closer to what you'd call an artificial general intelligence. So not just an artificial intelligence or a narrow AI, but more of one that, man, this thing can do, at least in anything that's like economically valuable, this thing can do the same or better than a human.
Incredible.
And that's incredible. I think there's a whole lot of potential there. In some ways, it's also absolutely terrifying.
Right.
And
right.
so, when it comes to ChatGPT, when it comes to large language models, which that is, and just all these more advanced levels of AI that we're starting to get into, where it's like, this is starting to do a lot of what a human can do, in some cases maybe even surpassing what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at a point now where it's like, even if we're not directly using these things, like maybe you've never opened ChatGPT, it's being integrated into all these things that you are using. And I mean, it's just going to become such a prevalent thing in our lives that, hey, it wouldn't hurt to understand a little bit more about how that works. And honestly, probably think about like, what are our boundaries here? Like, what are we okay with? What's too far?
Totally. So, one of the things about AI that concerns me, because I agree with you that there's this mind-blowing aspect to it that's really incredible and impressive,
Sure.
While at the same time it's frightening to think that there is this, artificial intelligence that's rapidly learning. But one of the things that's taking place right now is that all of the big sort of, brain children behind this, if you will,
Yep.
those that created it, those that have influence over it, those that are utilizing it, those that used to really promote it, have really stopped and said, we need to thoroughly talk through it.
Totally.
But I sort of feel like we're almost behind the 8 ball in the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it's rapidly growing from week to week. Like, I was reading, a few articles just talking about, the rapid increase in its own intelligence.
Yep.
That the conversation's way too slow right now. So much so that some really pioneers of it have said, we need to put a 6-month pause, you were
Yeah,
saying.
and big names. I mean, Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, people who are very much ingrained in the development of AI in the tech industry.
Right.
I mean, the fact that they're in the know to that level and freaking out to that extent, I think that there's something there.
Absolutely. And so, 50,000 names have signed a petition to
Yep.
say we need to pause AI for 6 months.
Yep, and this is, CEOs, this is, some of the top academic minds. This is people who, truly understand what's being developed, what's being output, all that kind of stuff.
For all intents and purposes of like our listeners, viewers, I never leave you out. However, for those that really don't, they've only heard sound bites of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, mainstream is now hearing on the daily
Yep.
about new AI developments, and all the more as these apps are uploaded and then made for mass consumption, ChatGPT and a myriad of others. Give those of us that really have no scope whatsoever on what's going on what AI can do.
Yeah, so really, especially ChatGPT, which I think we're probably going to talk the most about today. Like, this is something new. We've had AI now for a while, deep learning, things like that, which it's crazy, like using artificial neural nets, like emulating in a lot of the ways the way our brains work to look at something in multiple layers at the same time, to understand something, to be able
Did
to
you say
interpret.
neural net?
Okay,
Neural
I'm going
nets.
to pause right here and just say, the minute you said neural nets, I'm going to give the caveat of Michael Scott and say, explain this to me like I'm in kindergarten. Or what did he say? Like I'm
What would he
5 years
say
old.
back?
Was it 5 years old or kindergarten? All right, so explain
kindergarten.
ChatGPT like I'm in kindergarten.
Yeah, so really, I mean, the biggest thing I think we're seeing here is it's not just, looking at something and understanding what it is. It's generating content. This is a generative AI now.
Okay.
And through that, even like images, videos, like we're seeing AI now is that it's not just understanding something, interpreting it, giving you results. Like, it's creating essentially new content. And so I mean, to the extent that like, this is crazy. Like 5 minutes of just telling it a little bit about Pastor Sammy, who he is, how he talks. I'm gonna let Cam, who is our director of impersonations, read this. But this is
should I read it or should Sammy read it?
actually, you know what? Is it better to hear it from Sammy? All right. So here's the deal. I just told it a very little bit about how Sammy communicates. Some of the keywords that you use, things like that. And not a lot of thought. This is literally like 5 minutes of effort thinking about like, hey, how do you talk? What are your interests? Things like that. And then we've essentially created an AI Sammy as far as your voice and being able to communicate to some extent a style of Sammy. And then after doing that, we just gave it a very simple prompt. We said, hey, in so many words, open up a new podcast episode for Simplexity on the topic of AI. You're here with Cam, with Evan, and this is what it gave you.
Okay. You want me to read it, Boots?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Here we go. Hey, dude.
Yeah.
How we doing, fam? It's your boy, Pastor Sammy, coming at you live with another blasting episode of Simplexity Podcast. I've got my ace, my partner in crime, the ever swell Cam Smart. It left out Boots.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
I forgot
so-
to program
hey.
that. Hey.
Right here with me. What's poppin', little partner?
Not much.
But hold up.
The fact that it says it twice.
That's
Hold
so
up,
you.
hold up.
And I did not give it that. I just came up with that. On its own.
Unreal. We ain't just got Cam in the building today. We got something special, fam. We also got the one, the only, a resident smarty pants, the nerd of all nerds,
Oof.
Evan Connelly with us. Evan ain't just your regular Joe. This Bubs can talk tech like no other. Evan, we're delighted to have you here. But fam, let me tell you, it ain't just Evan's brain that's impressive. Nah. It ain't just about them smarts. This little partner got some serious shoe game. For
What?
real. He does.
Hey, these are new.
Yeah, I saw those.
How does it
A
know?
little mid-high. It knew. For real. I mean, those sneakers are absolute fire. Evan, respect.
Does it say that? Evan,
Yes,
respect?
Evan, exclamation point,
Yep.
respect.
Nice.
Today's topic, ladies and gents, is going to be a wild ride. We're going to dive into the brain-bending world of AI. That's right, artificial intelligence. We'll be chatting about how AI is changing the world and what that means for us everyday folks.
That's
Evan's
us.
here to help us break it down, make it all simple for us. So stick around, fam, because this is going to be one exciting episode. Let's get into it.
Oh my god.
Man, I
That
gotta
was
say-
better than your intro.
Way better.
Hey, and what's crazy is, I hear some words in there that I'm like, yeah, it's not Sammy, but like what's popping. But
Right.
hey, 5-10 minutes of thought, and it's so close. Which
No doubt.
On one hand, like we've said, I think is going to be a trend here. Is like that's so impressive, but then you start thinking about how that could be abused. That's also
better
absolutely
believe it.
terrifying.
And it's so, for lack of better terms, it's so not mechanical,
Right. Mhm.
or impersonal.
Yep.
There's a bit of an overreach in there,
Sure.
but the fact that it has so much personality,
Yeah.
so much nuance, and all of that is,
But
it's terrifying.
The cool thing about that, because I've experimented with ChatGPT a bit, is you could take that entire response and you could say something like, tone down the enthusiasm by 10%.
Yep.
And it'll do
Could
it.
you really?
Yeah, like
Totally.
that's how fine-tuned you can tweak this thing. It's crazy.
Yep, just little keywords like that. You can just come back to that same thing. You can refine it. You can give it such detailed direction, and to a great extent, it can actually follow that out. So when it comes to something like this, or just even any of the different ways you might use this, like trying to create something, trying to understand something.
Totally.
Like explain this like I'm 5, like I'm a kindergartner. You can tell it to do that. You can give it a complicated topic, and it can really distill it down in more simple terms, all kinds of stuff like that.
So, like this exercise was emulating a personality and really, creating a script so as to, open up an episode.
Right.
And I know that there's, one of the major aspects of AI that really, surrounds, or the conversation that surrounds it, is what then will this affect by way of the American workforce, the
Sure.
global
Yeah.
workforce, careers, what people went to school for. And so it's been thought that, hey, this is a while off.
Yep.
Just recently, I have a dear friend that is he's in software sales for a massive, massive company based out of New York. Long story short, he was sitting in a boardroom as he was getting ready to sort of forge his pitch to a Fortune 500 company, wherein he needed the analysis created to show that all of the competitors of whom he was going to make this pitch to, where they were allotting all of their resources, how much money they were spending on software development, upgrading their cybersecurity, all of this stuff, of which his all-inclusive software accomplished. But he needed to show you need to come off the dollar. Why? Because A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, all of these companies are already ahead of you spending the money. Typically, what he said was it would take him at minimum 2 weeks to get his analysis director to create such a file for him to take into this pitch. He plugs it into ChatGPT. He does this in the context of a board meeting.
Yep.
And in 10 minutes, it had created a full doc, knowing where the monies went, who the people were, who the CEOs were, who the executives were, where the money was going, to what companies, only then to give this to his analysis and say, verify. And he said that his analysis was like white as a ghost, be the fact that, you can imagine guys at that level, these guys are making well over six figures only for ChatGPT to do their job in a fraction of the time. That, he said, he didn't even have words. So it's not like a far off, it's here.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that's, part of the reason why it's worth talking about is as powerful as it is, and largely because of that, I think there's so many legitimate even fears to think through whether I think there's probably two biggest fears, I'd say. For a lot of people, especially if you're in more of an information economy role,
right?
Hey, it's a legitimate concern. What does this look like for my career?
I think about speechwriters,
Totally.
people whose job it is to write something or type something out in the voice of.
Yeah, totally.
You don't need that anymore.
Yeah,
Totally.
Take every State of the Union address in all of history, find the best things, and use a little bit of my voice, and that small prompt would probably put something out that's really high quality.
Yeah,
totally.
So I think a lot of legitimate concern in a whole lot of industries, but then also I think almost everyone to some extent, there's that fear in me, is this thing gonna just take over? Is it
Absolutely.
gonna achieve some kind of control? Is it ultimately gonna, is it gonna be an AI doomsday?
Terminator.
Yeah, Terminator scenario.
So let's give, just before we move into that, I want to just give some good news.
Yeah, totally.
I want to give some good news to certain people that are in certain career lines that have occupations that are least likely to be affected.
Okay.
Okay? Because this was my first.
I'm all ears.
Is AI going to preach for me?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to do complexity? Obviously,
Probably.
they are.
Hey,
That's your new little partner. It's just a little robot sitting here.
That hot dog stand might be coming sooner than I thought. However, okay, top 10 with the lowest risk of automation. Okay, you read 12.
yeah, I've got a couple different lists here. So here's 12 jobs that are least likely to be impacted by automation, by AI.
Yes.
Number one being teachers. Okay, I can kind of
Yes.
see that.
So all of our teachers out there, you need not fret.
Yep. Lawyers and judges, which
That's surprising.
judges I can see,
Yeah.
I don't want my fate determined by an AI.
Yeah.
Lawyers, though, when it comes to a lot of the outside the courtroom stuff, especially, I
Right.
think there is that legal shield thing you can get, and it's if you ever need a will written, things like that.
Totally.
That kind of stuff. I could see
Right.
that becoming an issue, but
Unless you're Harvey Specter,
then you're
then you're safe.
safe.
Harvey's going to be all right. And Mike Ross and Lewis Litt. Anyway.
I'm kind of curious. We don't need to dwell on this for too long, but I'm curious about the judge thing in the sense that if the goal is to be unbiased, isn't that one of the main pushes for AI? Is you're going to get, of course, you're always going to have biases in the programming, but it seems like you'd be able to mitigate bias more through AI than a human who's
I think you will, but I also think there's something about our desire to see a human do certain roles, even knowing it's less perfect.
Yeah, like I think that there's got to be, and of course this is part of the discussion or the conversation that's ensuing all around us. In that, at what point do we need to insulate human out? Let me say it this way: at what point do we need to insulate ourselves from just resigning all human interaction over to automation, so that we can safeguard personal connection?
Yep.
Like I understand like that analysts will be replaced with AI. Why? Because it can do it rapid fire.
Sure. Customer service. You think about like, hey, you're waiting on hold right now for an hour just to talk to someone.
Totally.
Things like that.
Absolutely. But where my life hangs in the balance, whether or not I go to prison or not, or whether or not the judge finds me guilty of a crime based on the merits therein or all of the data, I don't want that taken over by a computer. I want to make sure that you understand case by case where I'm coming from, some of my...
Do you want it to be a judge who's more likely to rule against you before lunch, though? Like, isn't that documented that if they're hungry, like
Sure.
That's true.
you can
That's
eliminate
true.
that kind of bias? And I don't want to speak against all of our judges, but
Right.
it's
And we'll
just
see how it
playing
plays
devil's
out over
advocate
time.
here.
I mean, I know, like,
Very true.
There's similar arguments, like when it comes to airplanes. Like, would you get on a Southwest airplane that's being flown by a computer? Like, technically, we might get to a point where it's like 10 times safer, less
Yeah.
likely to be an issue. But at
Right.
the same time, there's that. I want a real person who's got their own life vested in controlling this thing, and
Totally.
so I could see both sides of that.
Okay, so lawyers and judges.
Yep. Directors, managers, and CEOs.
Campus directors, very good.
Yep, safe for now. Which again, I think it's like that human element. Like, do you want to report to a computer?
Right, right.
Politicians, yeah.
You see that? Politicians?
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
They probably wrote that.
Yep.
You
Politicians
better believe it.
will create whatever laws are needed to
To
ensure.
protect their...
Yep. HR managers, which again, it goes to like, I think technically we'll see a point where AI could be a manager, but it's that desire, like, do you want to report to
Right.
a computer, have a computer tell you what to do to correct you?
Yeah.
I know Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, like, he's actually noticed this even in the way ChatGPT talks right now, and he hates it. That in some cases, when you try to go against the parameters it's been given, the safeguards, it'll kind of scald you a little bit. It'll talk to you a little bit like a child, and that's not intentional. but-
See, that freaks me out.
Yep.
Therein
Yeah.
lies the issue. When's this thing know how to hit the nuke button
Yep.
because humans pissed it off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the part that okay.
Chat GPT.
You stupid human.
Yeah. What? Yeah, I don't like that.
I'm with you. And so I think, when it comes to like, hey, HR, like, yeah, I don't want to be doing my performance review and hearing a computer tell me what I could do better.
Yeah.
That's right.
You were 34% inefficient.
Yeah, that is so dystopian.
Right.
So that's like, hey,
Cardella, you can't be replaced.
Cardella is safe. I think we're starting to feel like a lot of us around here are
This
pretty
is
good.
just us trying to insulate our own
Yeah,
jobs.
We're just, the
the whole thing's about
yeah.
us providing ourselves comfort.
Yeah. So in the comments right now, if you could just reassure us that we still have a path
That's right,
forward,
yeah.
It was
we
nice
really need
knowing
any
you.
reassurance.
My job's gonna get replaced.
Yeah.
So.
Never back.
Never.
Stop.
So then you move into arts, like singers. I could totally see that. Like, and here's
Might
the
have
thing.
to go into that, Boots.
Hey, I've heard you do some worship before service starts.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think you've got a voice.
Stop. Stop.
That's one
I
way to
know.
put it.
I know.
A voice.
It's terrible. I can't even make a joyful noise unto the Lord.
But you know what?
Let's
That's
go.
that's interesting, right? So when we talk about singers, and then later on in this list, professional athletes, the AI in some cases, like, it can do these things better. Like, we've had for a while now AI that can play chess better than a human. But what's interesting is no one wants to see two AIs play against each other. They don't even seem to really want to see a human play AI now that we've proved it can beat a human. And I would say, like, I don't have numbers on this, but I think chess might actually be more popular now than it has been even historically.
That's true.
And so even though we have this
All the
computer,
more after Queen's Gambit.
absolutely. And so we have this computer that can do it better than a human, and yet we don't seem to care about that or want to see that. Like we want that imperfection. We want that human element.
Yeah.
The drama of it.
Exactly.
There's competition.
Yeah,
Right.
There's emotions.
And so I think, in a lot of areas you might see that play out. Even though, in so many areas, maybe this thing can eventually do it better right now,
Right.
that we still choose not to use it that way. Psychologists, okay, I can see
Yep.
that's another one on this list. Priests and other spiritual figures.
Come on, somebody.
relief.
There we go.
Surgeons.
Pretty low down the list, huh?
It's a little
Number
concerning
8.
now you mention it. Maybe we need to bump that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Surgeons.
that anymore.
Okay, and here's another one.
Could we speak to the the spiritual figure one, because wasn't that attempted recently?
Yes.
So
That's right.
There was a service in Germany. I think it was like a Protestant convention, something like that. So it might have been more, ministry people in attendance, and I believe it was more, just to test the bounds, more of an experiment. Like I don't think it was, hey, let's try this out, and if this works good, this is going to be every week.
Right.
But what they did was one guy, just through prompting, I believe mostly ChatGPT, he used some other stuff too, because all right, so backstory, like the entire service, opening to close, music, the sermon, everything was AI generated.
Right.
And so he generated the words to the songs, he generated the sermon, every interaction. And then not just that, but to communicate it, he used digital avatars, essentially AIs that were, video generated people to communicate them. And, the content from what I heard, it wasn't anything heretical as far as I've heard.
Right.
But there was no emotion in it. And, even as AI gets there, there was this disconnect of the common feedback was like, I couldn't connect with it.
Right.
Even though the points made sense, they were logical, they were clear. There was something about hearing this from another human,
Absolutely.
So that just, I think even as it progresses, there's probably going to be a whole lot of that.
Totally. And I think it's worth noting that particular service where they attempted that, there was major backlash.
Oh, yeah.
As to them trying to utilize that.
Yeah, inside and outside. I mean, the people in attendance, I believe I heard some walked out.
Yeah. And which warms my heart.
Yeah.
Because I believe that when we get into AI, one of the things that we have to remember, and this is the slippery slope and, some of the moral and ethical conversations that we need to have around AI, but we cannot forget that there is an imago, the image of God, that's imprinted on human beings' lives, not artificial intelligence lives. So us being the image bearers of God, us being the ambassadors, the ministers of reconciliation, those that were once dead, now found, now alive, now really conduits of his grace and his light and his life and his truth and all of this, none of that can be replaced by AI.
Filled with the Holy Spirit as well.
Yep,
Come
filled
on,
with the Holy
somebody.
Spirit. Yeah.
Amen.
And I know you asked a question recently. I think it triggered a really interesting discussion. But as we're testing AI, just like asking it all these questions, we've seen some interesting things. Like, I think it can help you find references in the Bible.
Oh,
really
absolutely.
Well. Almost, I would say one of the areas I've seen it be most accurate actually has been with Scripture, which is really interesting.
Totally.
But it can do that. You've got a really cool example of evangelism.
Yeah.
If you speak to that, but. And then at the same time, so it can do all these things really well. It can write out prayers. Like we've asked it to just write out a prayer and just see what it generates. But then that raises the question, can AI pray? And that's absolutely not. Like at its core, what it's doing, and it's amazing that it can operate at this caliber just by doing this. But really, it's essentially this simple, that it takes everything that you've given it, your prompt, your question, what do you want it to do?
Certainly.
And then in so many ways, it's just kind of comparing that to its database. It knows, it's downloaded the bulk of the internet. And, not just, like Facebook, but this thing has, books that have been archived and digitized, all kinds of records, obviously, the Bible. And so it's comparing.
It essentially has the Bible memorized.
To an extent,
for lack of a
absolutely,
better way to
And
explain
so
it.
then using all of that, using all kinds of liturgical prayers, things like that, it can look at what you're asking, the content, and it's going word by word, one at a time, saying, like, what is the most likely word to be used here? And then it picks that first word, and then it's like, okay, if I'm starting with the word based on the context here, like, what is the most likely next word? Just percentage-wise.
Wow.
And it uses some randomness there, so it's not giving you the same response every time. But so, essentially, it's generating word by word, just a probability.
Absolutely.
And it's a computer, just really doing math almost. And again, like, it's incredible what it can output with that. But so, to a question like, can AI pray? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I believe it was Karen Newhoff that wrote the article about, pastors that are confiding in
Yep.
and going to ChatGPT for, sermon creation
Yep.
and for content gathering and for cross-referencing and the like. And of course, there's something within us that goes, wait a minute, that has a degree of plagiarism to it. And you can't ask a computer to create a sermon for you, yada, yada, yada.
Sure.
The point, though, was made that when you consider the erosion of the evangelical church in the United States and how many times there are heretical things said from the pulpit, how
Sure.
many times things are said and communicated poorly that's not biblical. Truth be told, actually, I know of many pastors that could afford to use ChatGPT to create sermons because they'll be incredibly more accurate and biblical in their construct. And so it's not altogether bad.
100%.
When you use it for a content gathering device or making sure certainly that it's accurate, biblical, not apostate or heretical, all
Yeah,
of those
but
things.
Honestly, so many ways within the church. Like, I don't know if you have it accessible or if you remember, but you asked it, essentially to generate a way of sharing the gospel?
I did. And I could pull it up, but I could just summarize.
Just summarize.
Essentially, I was having a conversation about AI with Aramis, who is our middle school coordinator, but he's also very passionate and very active in evangelism. So he'll go out with groups and he'll preach the gospel to people, and that's something that he's very burdened about.
Right.
And so we're talking about AI and all its capabilities, and he goes, okay, I'm impressed by this thing, but...
Is that how we talk?
Yeah. Yeah.
Spot on.
And he goes, but can it preach the gospel? And I was like, well, let's see. And so I type out this prompt. I essentially say, communicate the gospel from an evangelical Christian perspective in a way that uses casual, conversational language using real-life analogies to help clarify. That was the prompt.
Yep.
And then in response, it prints out this 4-paragraph story about a guy who wants to go on a road trip and he's really excited, and then his car breaks down and there's absolutely nothing he can do about it. And so he's just stuck in the middle of nowhere, can't get to his destination. But then someone pulls up in a brand new car, works perfectly, and the guy, it's supposed to be Jesus, says, I'll take you to where you're trying to go. You can't get there by yourself. All you need to do is get in the car and trust me. And so then, using that analogy, AI, ChatGPT,
Sure.
breaks down what each element represents. The broken car is sin. There's nothing you can do. Works can't get you there. Trust, that's faith. Jesus, it breaks down every element in a very clear way and in a compelling story. And so, and to your point earlier, generates that in a matter of seconds.
Yep.
And so I read this
Incredible.
off to Aramis, and he's like, okay, that's pretty good.
That's a fantastic example. And what's incredible is, it's not just.
And then I use the same example this Sunday.
Yeah. Listen closely to the upcoming sermon. You're going to hear a new analogy. But man, what's crazy is, it's not like it's just a search engine, right? Like, it's not like it just found this on some website. And
Exactly.
it's just, it created that just
Right.
based on what it knows and what it's observed in all these different areas. And that's a very legitimate way that I think it could be used, positively to advance the gospel.
Yeah, because you could tweak that. You could tweak that example and
Sure.
say, let's say we contextualize it.
Sure.
So it's like, use an example that would be applicable and compelling to X, Y, and Z audience.
Yep.
Like somebody who has had this life experience. Like you can tweak it and refine it so that the example and the story that it provides is even more relatable.
Yeah, like personalized content is a big thing. I know Coca-Cola is actually already looking at how they can use AI for their advertising to generate images and the ad copy to be unique to what they know about you. And I think about Paul's words, like to be all things to all people. Like we can use AI to a greater extent than we could before to be able to be all things to all people, to reach them with the gospel. Like there's some really, I think, positive, really promising ways that we could use this, even within the church and the faith community.
Let me ask you a question. How rapidly is AI growing, and, or better asked, how fast is it learning?
It's insane. So, I mean, as far as like growth, I mean, just even as far as who's using it, I think it was within the first few months of just being released of ChatGPT, they picked up 100 million users, which, I mean, that number, I mean, that's mind-blowing. Just in a few months, something new like that to be able to onboard that many people. And that matters because it's learning not just from the internet and all this data it's ingesting, but even from the conversations. There's feedback that you give it as you're using it.
Yes.
And that helps it ultimately become smarter to a sense. And so, that adds into that too. So we've moved, I forget exactly when GPT 3.5 came out. It's one of the models, almost like a car or a phone. Like you have the iPhone original, now we're on like iPhone 14. Like
7 Plus.
some of us don't update as
Are you
fast as
serious?
others.
That's right.
I'm proud of you. That's a
Wow.
7 plus.
Yep.
Have you had that since
too.
it came out? This is gonna be a whole tangent.
Yeah.
I got this actually a little bit after it came out.
Okay, I'm feeling like I shouldn't have gotten my iPhone 14 Plus Max, whatever.
Ev gets like the 16 before.
Yeah.
I've gotten
it's even
better,
out.
but I actually years back, man, I pre-ordered my iPhone,
I remember.
and then I flagged the delivery on UPS for them to hold it at the receiving center. So, because they're not allowed to deliver it until launch day. I lined up at a UPS facility at like 7:30 in the morning with like 10 of us nerds, and we're all just standing there. We wanted to be the first ones to get the new iPhone. Like, we didn't want to wait for the UPS guy to get to our house.
Wow.
So, and you could tell the UPS people were kind of annoyed with us, but we're just like, these guys in uniforms are walking in to get their trucks, and we're just all lined up waiting for our
We're
phones.
really excited.
And
I would have
like,
loved to hear that conversation inside the bay.
Oh, man.
Hey,
These.
yeah. So, total nerd here. But
Total.
Yeah, I've gotten better. I'm not quite like that.
You just did it to yourself, then.
I did.
partner.
Unashamed.
Amen. Okay, so not only is it, so ChatGPT, is it 4 or 5 now?
So we're on 4 now, and I mean, even so, the advancement there again, I think probably a matter of months. I don't know the exact timeline, but to go from 3.5 to 4, and with that, like it can take in so much more information. Like what it's trained on is a greater amount of information. You can give it much larger prompts, and so like say you want to understand something, whether that's a book or a spreadsheet or what have you. Like it can look at a bigger amount of information, and the quality too. I think we might touch on this, but like it has some issues. Like it hallucinates, which is
Right.
crazy. Like it'll just basically make stuff up, but that's significantly better, like less likely to happen going from 3.5 to 4. And so each model, it's like it can do more, it knows more, it's just overall smarter and honestly more like a human as far as what it can understand, what it can output. So that's happened really quickly, and from what I'm hearing, probably within the next year or so, we'll probably get to GPT-5, which that is probably going to trigger a conversation of, is this thing an AGI or an artificial general intelligence? Which, like, the whole thing there is like, can this thing do just about anything that a human could do when it comes to like an economically valuable task? So in all these different areas of work, like, could this thing do what you can do? And I think there's gonna be a real conversation there of like, are we at that point?
Okay, so everybody wants to know,
Yep.
including myself. At what point does this thing become smarter than the human
Yep.
and empowered enough to turn against? Like at what point, and is there a point, or are you aware of any safeguards in place that keep it from thinking on its own?
Yeah, so we're not quite there where it's thinking on its own, but that's what is being worked towards. I don't think we're that far off. I think, if not, months, probably within years, like we're going to see that fairly soon, where to some extent it can do that. And there are safeguards in there. Like I know, like ChatGPT, for example, they talk about the ability, hey, it's a system. Like, we can cut the wires, we can unplug it. But then at the same time, I don't know that that's enough. Like,
Yeah.
there's ways around that. Like, have you guys heard of Stuxnet?
No.
So years
One more
back-
time?
Stuxnet.
Nope.
So this was a virus that was developed by our government and the Israeli government. I believe it was discovered in like 2010. And so we wanted to affect the progress of the Iranian nuclear system. They were enriching uranium. We wanted to slow that down. But the problem was their computers were air-gapped. They weren't connected to the internet. So how do you hack a computer that's not even connected to the internet? We developed this virus that spread through USB drives. And so it started off, we got into a couple networks, we started spreading it, and it would just propagate over these different USB drives. And it would look at the computer, and they knew enough about what the Iranian computers looked like that were controlling the centrifuges that were enriching the uranium. And if it was not in the right spot, it just blended in, got in the background, continued to spread to more flash drives, but it wouldn't do anything. When it finally got to the Iranian system, it was able to get into all the little different pieces of hardware that were controlling the centrifuges. And what it did was, it didn't just make things blow up or stop working. It changed the speed that the centrifuges were moving at so that it would not successfully enrich the uranium, but it also altered what they were showing on their screens and their dashboards. So
Oh
everything looks like it's
my-
running according to plan. It looks like it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. But meanwhile, it's altering how it's moving at just enough speed so that this thing couldn't enrich the uranium.
I
And
feel.
now-
Sorry, go ahead.
But just, what I mean? So like, not even connected to the internet, we were able to create something that could spread across the world, get into the right computer, and without detection, without humans being able to tell what was going on behind the scenes, to like in a kinetic fashion to alter the way that.
What?
Your face the whole time, you were like, your mouth just kept getting wide.
So
That question was posed to make us feel better, Evan.
Hey. But one thing that has come out of this, I love you more now.
Yeah, really.
That you were able to so clearly articulate all of that. I love those guys that know how to nerd out and invade all that.
Sure.
But you, my friend,
Hey.
I am sitting here,
Yeah.
mind blown at what just happened. And I mean, all of those words, air gap and
Hey.
Well, that just makes me
Real
think
time.
if we could
Yeah.
do that in 2010,
right.
what is
what
is it doing to make us think that it's doing the right thing?
100%.
So there's a legitimate concern there, but then at the same time, I think with any advancement with any technology, like there's extremes. There's people who they look at it in the extreme of it's going to do the most, and there's two, divides there. It's going to be positive, it's going to be a utopia, or it's going to be a dystopia, right?
Right.
And then there's the other extreme of this thing doesn't really matter. It's not going to do anything. Almost every time, I think it plays out more in the middle, right? Like it doesn't transform life to like the greatest extreme that anyone would say positive or negative. And
Right.
it's also not as, useless or less of a factor as people would say. I think it's usually like almost everything. It's more in the middle, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think we're going to have an AI dystopia or doomsday where AI just, takes everybody out, anything like that. Or,
Right.
where no one has jobs. I know that's never a big concern is like, hey, what about my job? Like this goes back, I think, like in all of history as we've come up with new tools, new technology, like inevitably jobs do get replaced, but there's always things to do. And honestly, like for every job that's lost, that advancement,
Yeah.
I think there's new work that wouldn't have even existed if it wasn't for that technology. Like I was looking at this list, it's so crazy,
Yeah.
like just fears that people had throughout history that like no one's gonna have jobs left because look what's happening. So in 1850, there were a group of New York City tailors that threatened to strike unless their employers stopped using sewing machines. Like the sewing machine was just so scary, like no one's gonna
Yeah.
and to this day, I mean, humans use them. It's not that we don't need humans anymore. We can create more stuff now.
Absolutely.
I know this isn't even on this list, but there used to be people that would light lamp posts. Like their job was just to keep, and then hey, we came up with a light bulb.
Right.
But no, it's not that society just like give all these unemployed people now. Like there's new jobs as a
Right.
result of the fact that we can keep buildings lit 24/7.
Yeah.
It actually opened up possibility for more types of work. 1860, there were shovelers who handled grain that arrived at U.S. ports, and they formed a protective union because they were concerned about grain elevators taking their jobs. And I mean, for that exact task, yeah, okay, we didn't need shovelers anymore, but how many people would then later be needed for other kinds of industrial work?
Absolutely.
Because we could take in more material, we could create more stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on and on. There's England's Red Flag Act that required a person to carry a red flag in front of a steam-powered train because we couldn't trust the train to navigate the same way that we could trust a horse with intelligence. And so, like, there's these fears, and I mean, legitimately, like, okay, some career paths might be impacted, even
Right.
replaced, but not to the point where we don't have jobs, where we're not working. That it just, I think in so many ways, maybe even there's more jobs, there's more opportunities because we can do more.
So where I'd like us to land this, because we go on and on and on, but I do want to talk about the moral implications of this. But I want to pitch an idea to you guys.
Yeah.
About just a paradigm or a perspective that I have on artificial intelligence and all of this automation that, in a way, as an image bearer of God, when I think about, in one sense, the incredible benefits that AI provides, while at the same time, the incredible threat equally
Sure.
that it could cause, it seems to me that from the beginning of time, mankind has always attempted to ascend the heights of God.
Yep.
Like to go beyond our, not natural borders, but to ascend the heavens, if you will, so as to position ourselves on an equal playing field.
Yep.
I think of,
Tower of Babel.
Totally.
Exactly. The Tower of Babel. There's an incredible scripture where it says that God, in and among the Elohim, said, we must confuse their voice, because if not, nothing is impossible for mankind.
Yep.
That's quite the statement. Actually, Beck, I need for you to fact check that verse in particular. Like, for God to think, I got to scramble them
Yep.
in order to thwart them because they'll stop at nothing.
Yep.
Like, we're always aspiring. What's
My
that?
computer's not loading.
I'm sorry?
My computer's not loading. Sorry.
Of course.
Frozen.
I believe that was in reference to Babel.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. So, I think of this, and I think this is just another measure, not
Totally.
another attempt. I don't want to speak maliciously of those that are creating it. I just see the threat that it
sure.
then proposes, and so I think we're always trying these avenues so as not to bow our knee.
Yep.
So as to always keep ascending, and not that they don't come without benefits, but this in and of itself, when I think of Apple's latest release of
Oh yeah, the
headset, I mean, that is a utopian world
Sure.
that you can step into, and so as to not have to deal with reality, but then step into your proverbial heaven,
Yep.
where everything is perfect and form fit
Almost like
to
the
your
movie
liking.
Wall-E. Like you're in your chair, you've got your beverage. And,
Absolutely. And so it gets you further and further away from reality, but at the same time, it can take you further and further away from God.
Sure.
Without having to deal with the conscientiousness or the spiritual exercise of going, there is a God and I'm not him, and he deserves my worship, my adoration, and my sacrifice to live for his glory, not my own. All of this has a feel, if you will, in its moral fiber that removes you from that. Do I sound, here's my question, do I sound like an old person when I say that? Or do I am old. I'm 46.
Yeah, let me
but I'm young
clarify.
at heart. And I've been hitting the gym really hard lately.
Looking good.
You
Thank
look like it.
Thank you. However, do I sound like a fundamentalist when I say that? Or do you give any credence to that? And please, feel free to disagree, but I'll remember it.
Yeah, but you'll pay for it.
I don't think you're off base with that. I think there really is something to that. Again, not to say, just in the extreme there, that's all this thing's going to do, that it's going to be entirely damaging to our faith, to our relationship with Jesus. Because like
Right.
we talked about, there's some really amazing, powerful ways that we could leverage this to
Amen.
advance the gospel. But at the same time, hey, like with any technology, there is where is that going to meet? Somewhere in the middle, probably.
Right.
And so, I mean, even, this is a little different because this is communication. Like you talked about the Tower of Babel, like this is generating actual words and language. And, I think I heard this example and it was like so spot on. Like you think about like you work in an office environment, right? You're in corporate and you got the buzzwords and the jargon.
Right.
And so, hey, you want to email your coworkers, you want to sound legit. So you use AI to type up a memo or an email, and it creates this really long form thing that's elaborate and has all these big words. And then Cam gets it, and he's like, explain this to me like I'm 5. So he brings it into the AI, and it's taking that AI-generated content, going through an AI again, distilling it for him, which then he goes back to the AI and writes a reply to this person. And I mean, to some extent, like we're already seeing that with different, like you use Gmail, it's like, hey, do you want to say this? Do you want to say that?
Yeah, right.
So like, we're talking through these AIs to even real people.
Oh my gosh.
So
Right.
I think there's a really legitimate concern there.
Okay.
But I think, as far as like, how is that going to play out for us? I'm generally more of an optimist. I think
Yeah.
not that there's not going to be a detriment, not that we don't need to think about this, that we don't want to define boundaries. Like I was thinking like, should it become a standard that like, when you're reading something that's AI generated, like, should we know, like, almost like you go in the grocery store, like, this is organic.
Yeah.
Like, do we want to know if this book was generated by an AI? Like, should that be a disclaimer?
Absolutely.
If I'm reaching out to customer service, I mean, because not even just like live chat, like these things are slowly going to be able to like create voices and talk. Like,
Sure.
do you want to know when you call Verizon that you're talking to an AI? Should you know? Is that
Yeah.
a legitimate moral obligation to not pass this AI off as a person? Like Google Maps, like they've got one that can call businesses. Like, okay, 4th of July is coming up. Let's call these local businesses and ask them if they're open. And so it'll be like, hey, my name is Tom. I just wanted to know if you were open. Like, is that? I mean, hey, it's just a simple question, but like, is it passing it off and trying to?
Yeah.
So
It's good.
I think there is a real moral consideration there, and I think we do need more guardrails than we
Yeah.
have
And-
now.
And I think that the church needs to lead those conversations.
Absolutely.
Ask those questions and not retreat from it.
100%.
Because to your point, Sammy, I think that there are always going to be people in the advancement of technology and innovation who do have the idea of we're going to aspire to the heavens.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is their motivation, and it's not pure.
Right, totally.
But I think that also there's a redemptive responsibility that Christians have
Yeah.
to these things, whether it's the printing press or whether it's
Absolutely.
the internet.
Yeah.
So the internet has been used in atrociously evil ways, but it's also been used in really powerful redemptive ways
Yeah.
to reach people who don't know the gospel, or to give thousands of commentaries to the
Totally.
access to information and what
Yeah.
the saints of old said. That was never a possibility before.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So for Christians to step up and say, we're going to ask these tough questions, but we're going to try to come to answers about them, but we're also going to use this incredible advancement of technology in a redemptive way to advance the kingdom.
Right on, man.
100%.
Yeah.
Like the big thing right now, even within like AI, from what I understand, like the industry, is the problem of AI alignment. So you train these things on all this data, right? And just ingesting all this, like it can put out content that is evil, that is,
Right.
really damaging, harmful. Like, I mean,
And devoid of a biblical worldview
totally.
or of
And
any.
so
Right.
the question is, like, how do you, put in these parameters? How do you define essentially the worldview of this AI?
Right.
And so, there's a little bit, some of that just depends on the training. There's always going to be a bias there.
Yep.
Whoever's creating that AI, like upon that training, then they build in extra guardrails and parameters. But
Okay.
a lot of the way that it's learning is from human feedback. And so as people are using it, they're saying, was this reply helpful? Was this reply off? Did you like this? Did you not?
Right.
And so much of how it's shaped is going to be by who's using it.
Huh.
And so we could have this tendency as Christians, like, I don't know, this kind of freaks me out. Maybe I should just withdraw or hide.
Right.
But the less that our worldview is involved in this, the less it's going to be built into how this AI operates, and the more it could verge into that dystopia.
Amen. And I think, unfortunately, I don't want to go too broad brush here, but I think on a lot of, new advancement matters, or even in the way of pop culture, entertainment, film, the arts, things like that, Christians have always seemingly been a step behind.
Yep.
Only then to realize, wait a minute, this is here to stay. And so we need to sort of, include our voice into that. So whether that came by Christian filmmakers, producers, artists, that we realize, wait a minute, this is massively consumed.
Yep.
And so we need to then redeem it and add our voice to it. In the like manner,
Yep.
you said, we need to, AI's here.
Yep.
AI is staying here. Therefore, if we are going to engage with it, we should engage with it with a redemptive frame
Yep,
of
100%.
mind and a disposition to say, we're going to influence it
Yep.
with a biblical worldview, with truth, so that we don't let culture at large overtake it.
Totally.
So that, and then we're behind the eight ball once again.
And there's something to that, to being early, to being a first mover with that. Like, I think of, when the iPhone came out, so I don't remember exactly the timeline here, but okay, so it came out, just had a couple apps on there, it was cool. And then they decided they were going to open up an app store. So Life Church, they created a Bible app.
That's right.
And because they were one of the first apps to get approved, they immediately had all of these downloads, including people who probably never would have even opened up a Bible, but they were just curious. They're like, what is this Bible app in here? What does this do? And so you've got people reading scripture just because they were early to the game, they brought this in there.
Wow.
And then now to this day, it's one of the most popular apps you can download for your phone.
Yep.
And so to be involved, and I think to be involved early, I
Amen.
think there's a real benefit there and a real potential.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that, and I think it's an exciting thing to think through. Okay, how can we be part of the advancement of the kingdom
Yep.
early with this? Been a fascinating conversation, Evan. I certainly learned a lot today. I hope you did as well, listening at
You're
home.
the smartest guest we've ever had.
Yeah.
You win that.
Yeah. Take that, Nelson. But we appreciate you guys listening to this episode. Let us know what you think. What are your thoughts, concerns, fears, opportunities, and excitements?
Absolutely.
I don't know. But go ahead and follow us. Give us a rating if you'd be so kind.
Love you guys.